as poised, as informative, because that is who you are and that's the information that you're bringing forward. So Lisa will be here in just a moment to introduce Terilyn.
I'm here. I'm here. Hello. Hello, world. I can see people. I'm so excited.
Oh my gosh.
So Terilyn and I are on our way over. Hello, everyone. We're so glad to finally be in one place where I can scroll through here and I can see Christina Aragon and I can see Dulce and I can see Michelle Bennett and Cheryl McRae. We're so excited to see so many of you this morning. Terilyn and I were having a great conversation over on that other side. So I hope you were able to hear part of that. You know, she was telling some jokes about things that went wrong in board presentations. And for anybody who was watching her, she just kept going and she just kept going. And sometimes you turn around and you look at the technology and you just keep going. So we are modeling for you resiliency and flexibility. Anyway, I know she's going to be here in just a second, but
yep, she's just about to log in.
Perfect. The other thing that's going to be super helpful about this is if anybody wants to send me questions in the chat, you are able to do that. And then I can go ahead and help sort of have a conversation with Terilyn and pitch some of those questions. But what I do want to reiterate is that this presentation is not just for CBOs. Every single one of us needs to be incredibly effective in communication in our roles. And quite honestly, you never know when we're going to be asked to go somewhere and present. And so the tips that she's going to share are really for anyone who is ever going to make a presentation. And like it or not, that's probably going to be you. So, you know, the tips that she's going to be able to share and really talk about, whether it is board meetings, whether it is citizens bond oversights, whether you are going to a parent advisory meeting, or you're even practicing things in your own life in community organizations or in any of your religious affiliations, this information today is going to help you.
I saw her pop in, so I know she's right here. We have such hype. I feel like the hype club right now, trying to get this thing going. But I did see her log in and then pop out. So 1 sec.
I'm
There
here.
she is.
Yes,
I'm here. So.
Victory. Let's hit it from the top. Introduction, if you will. You guys go for it.
Okay, so I just want to say I'm reminded of a time in high school when I was telling a joke and so I got interrupted. We were on a bus, a field trip, and I was interrupted. They said, "Say it again," and I said it again. What was that? I didn't, noise, and I said it again. And then I finally got the joke through to everybody on the bus, and they were all listening, which had me mildly embarrassed. And then someone said, "Well, that was not worth it. I'm sorry." Like I kept trying, so I'm good. It wasn't a good joke, I guess. But so I'm hoping that this presentation is worth it after all you've been through. So I'm going to just dive right in and ask for the next slide. And there. So I was beginning before we got interrupted by the alarm. And so thank you for your prompt response to that, Tasha. Very duly noted that you are responsive to the alarms in your life. Know your board, or more broadly, know your audience. Why are you, what is it that this group has called you to address? And connect your presentation to their work, their mission. I'm going to speak specifically to the Board of Education and go back to where I was before we had to migrate over to this new link. I really appreciated when presentations made to the Board of Education connected the work with the mission of the district, because as I was saying before, and I apologize if you're hearing it again, but for those who maybe got lost in the move, I don't want this message to be to fail to get into the presentation today and the recording that people will be accessing. The mission of education organizations, the mission is student learning. And there's a ton of work that goes on around that, from nutrition services and transportation, bond management, facilities. Oh my goodness, the depth of facilities and maintenance work, right? The heavy lift during summer and the cycle of all your work, the acquisition of technology and so forth. while those become the responsibilities of specific people, of, you know, Jennifer down there in, I think, San Diego, I'm guessing, and Jeannie, and the folks who are on this call, right? Well, your work has a specific area of focus, and the folks who work with you, they have a specific area of focus. We need to always see that that work is connected to the cause of the organization and that student learning. And I encourage you in your presentations to always start with that, and throughout your presentation, connect your work to that, because we are not, we're not food service. We're not a restaurant, though food nutrition service is a huge part of what we do, but we do it so children can learn, access their learning, right? We're not payroll organizations. There are payroll companies out there. Payroll is about getting checks to our people electronically anymore in a timely fashion, thanking them for taking care of our kids, right? So all of it is connected to kids. And I just say, find your way to do that. I'm going to tell you one of my favorite little stories, and we're going to move on here. My sister-in-law worked in nutrition services in a district after having her first child. She was an accountant, but she wanted very much to be an at-home mom, wanted to make a little extra money. So she found a gig that allowed her to have the same schedule as her child. And so she worked for years very happily in nutrition services. And every single day that my sister-in-law, Annie, pulled into the parking lot at work, she said to herself, today, kindness is on the menu. So if you're the head of nutrition services and you're standing before your board or a group of parents, right, and or staff members, whatever that audience might be, to say, I'm going to share with you some information from nutrition services, and just want you to know that our job is to make sure children are fed so that they can learn. That is our primary responsibility. And we're mindful that every single day when our people are interfacing with students, kindness must be on the menu. Okay, now you've got me. Now I'm listening. But if you just start with, there have been some complaints about grilled cheese sandwiches, and I'm here tonight to share with you we're understaffed, and the cheese that we buy from the federal government's really bad, and whatever. I don't even know why I'm listening. So, and then underneath that umbrella statement that connects your work to the cause of the organization, which is kiddos, always kiddos, regardless of their age, they're all kiddos. As I get older, that's for sure the truth. I mean, everybody's just a kid anymore in my world, because I'm just getting older. So, but after you connect it, help me understand why I'm listening to you, right? Why are you there? What am I listening for? That's especially important with the board. So this first slide, know the Board of Education, know them as people. And if you don't, and if you then find a staff member. If I were in Mount Diablo and I was responsible for transportation and I was supposed to present to the board, I might ask Lisa for some time and ask her to help me understand the board and understand how to tee my message up so that it will resonate with the board. I would ask for that time and honor to the directors on this call, liberate your people to come to you and ask you for that as well. I say, really encourage that. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. Oh, good. Thank you, Lori. So again, just the opening. I want to know why I'm receiving this report. What do you want from me? I remember leaving a district office. I was not, I was working as a consultant in the comms area, and I happened to be seated at attending a board meeting, not participating in the board meeting. And there had been a presentation to the board on hydroponic farming. And following that, and it was really interesting information item, but following that item, and not from the dais, as everyone's leaving the meeting, a board member asked the superintendent, why did we get that report? I mean, it was interesting, but are we approving a program, or is the budget about to be cut? Or like, was it just filler? Or, I mean, and the superintendent said, I thought you'd find it very interesting. It's really one of the innovative programs at our high school to connect our kids to X, Y, and Z. And he said, well, you probably should have said that. Like, the board has said, you want us to find as many innovative ways to integrate science and engage students in X, Y, and Z. And this is an example of a program that staff created to meet that objective that the board has set forth. So, you know, again, connecting it to that notion of why am I listening to this is really helpful here. I just give you a couple of examples of some opening lines that I've heard in presentations that help me understand why I'm listening. We know that when students are hungry, their learning isn't optimal. And I'm here to share with you all the work being done in nutrition services, et cetera, et cetera. And this is more toward the business office, but it could apply as well to other areas. The cycle of your work, if you could clarify, I always like sort of, I'm a visual learner and I see that map at the mall. Remember the mall? Oh my gosh, like, wow. I think Clinique needs to like get online because you have to go to the mall to get it. And now like, who's on the mall? So anyway, that's just a little tip for Clinique. But remember the map at the mall, you are here. I think especially with the budget, there's such a cycle to the budget to help me see at a glance in a timeline, or maybe it's a clock, whatever visual you put on it, that's super simple, super simple. You are here, this is the process, this is the budgeting process. I think this is happening right now after we get the May revise from the governor. His revise, which says, signals to LAUSD to ask for a 20% increase. I think there's a misunderstanding in the general public that we're just going to go from a May revise to a 20% increase. And that's where I think you really want to just make sure that people understand the cycle of your work and where we're at this time as you present. Next slide. Concise. So I would encourage you to practice this, and I find that it works really well. You have to be really disciplined about it though. What's your point? There's a single point, Ann Wells, that you want to make, or 2 points that you want to make when you're presenting this particular item to your board or to an audience. Don't put it in fancy language. Don't bother polishing it. To yourself, what's the point? We need more buses. What's the point? We're going to have to revisit transportation and parents are going to be angry. And then you polish it and you connect it first to that broad theme. Let's stay with transportation. We know getting our students to school and home as efficiently as possible and with safety of paramount importance. It's really important. Getting our kids to school on time means that we can make the most out of their instructional day. Tonight, I need to present to you some challenges we face in transportation due to the staffing shortage, which is going to present some schedule changes that I need you to review and approve. You do not need to approve it tonight. Tonight is the first presentation of information. I'll bring it back to you for review. If that's the truth, right? I mean, stick to the truth, whatever. I'm just inventing this to make a point. But your point is that there are going to be transportation changes, and change doesn't come easily. It just doesn't. It means there's some give and take. And so I'm going to walk you through the dynamics of what we face, what we'll need to do, and I'm happy to take your questions throughout the presentation. Stop right there. Terilyn Finders. You want to know if the board's preference is to ask questions through your presentation. Are you going to let them raise a hand, or is it the superintendent's preference that they hold questions? Your superintendent will let you know. I think I see somebody from Castro Valley on the call here. The Parland Parveen, I love her so much. So you would want to ask Parveen, does the board like to ask questions throughout the presentation? Should I offer that? Do you want me to do you want to say, let's hear the presentation, then questions from the board? Also know if your item, when you go into a board meeting, and I'm just going to stay in that lane, though of course you can extrapolate from this and apply it to a bond oversight committee or a Chamber of Commerce presentation, but let's stay in the lane of a board meeting. You want to know when you go into that meeting if speaker cards have been pulled on your item. You want to know that. So just turn to, in your case, Charity, you turn to Amy and ask her, but right, everybody knows who collects those speaker cards. Before you go up to the podium, know if there are cards on your item and be very clear and help those who work for you, who are newer to this, to understand the rhythm of the work, that the board will call the item. Will they hear from you first in your report and then public comments? Or do they take public comments and then hear from you so that you can maybe weave answers to those public questions or criticisms into your presentation. Legally, while I am not a lawyer, though I am parked in a law firm here, so I do know this, you can do it either way, but you want to know which rhythm the board uses in your district. And you also want to make sure anybody who reports to you, Lisa, and has to stand and give a report knows that rhythm too, right? So that's very important. I'm not going to read my slides to you, but I will say visuals are much more important than images or than words. And I am to tell you something right now, as your new best friend, because we women have to stick together. Those long wordy slides, dump them. There's got to be a point on that slide. What is the point? Just make the point and then speak to it. But those long wordy slides, I'm telling you as a board member and anybody, you're like, oh boy. So dump that, sharpness. Next slide. Okay. If there's a concern, what are you doing about it and when? And so if you're changing the payroll system, when and why, but I need a real clear sense of that timing. What do you do if there's something you're reporting on, a change in transportation, shuffling classrooms around so you can accommodate universal pre-K, right? Which is like all about sinks and toilets. That was intended to get uproarious laughter, but I see you're all muted, so that's okay. I'm not going to be offended. But it all comes back. That is something as a board member I would need to hear. You know that. That's inside baseball. It's so clear to Lisa Gonzalez that as she moves those kids around on that campus to accommodate preschool, that she's got to have them in the right, our littlest learners, as I call them. They've got to be in the right space. And that means everybody else is kind of going to Rubik's Cube around them. Explain that to me so that I, as a trustee, can explain it to someone when they stop me in Safeway and say, why are you making all the fourth grade teachers move, Ann Wells? They are so mad. And say, I don't blame them because change isn't easy. And some of them have been in their class. You can empathize, you can go right there and connect with that emotion. That's okay. Don't go defensive on me. I don't blame them. Like, no, I wouldn't want to move my office just to accommodate somebody else necessarily. But here's the thing. We need those, right? And then you can explain and just say, this is what we're going to be doing to help those teachers relocate their classrooms. But I know they're frustrated and I'm sorry for that. But the good news is we're going to have a lot of baby learners and that's terrific. We'll have them for a longer period of time in their education, get to know them early. So just go to that human place and connect with that emotion when you can. A lot of the work that comes out of your area, CASBO folk, is all the back of the house work, right? That doesn't necessarily feel immediately connected to those kiddos. So you want to connect it to the children, to the learning, and keep it human. Next slide. Yes, if you can, when you're presenting to the board, send your materials in advance so that you can gather their questions in advance. And I know that everyone who has presented to boards of education knows how important that this is. Again, I'm stressing that if somebody on your team is going to be presenting to the board about fencing or alarms, whatever, I mean fire alarms. That was for you, Tasha. Just keeping it real. That they understand that they can get a draft presentation to the superintendent in advance, or they can, most certainly you want to get your material in the Friday agenda packet to the board in advance and let them know to send their questions in to you so that you can be prepared for them. Next slide. I don't think some of our newer folks who we bring on to into the districts don't necessarily understand that rhythm. You guys need to make that really very clear to them. Your body language is important. Please, when you're presenting to me, speak to me, look at me. Like, don't read your slides. Don't have your eyes on your slides. Just talk to me. Really, I think for the most part, board members, for the most part, there are some exceptions, really want to show you great appreciation for the work that you're doing. And so even if they don't, You need to remember that your job always is to build confidence in the organization, and the way you present to people who are watching online or in the room will build that confidence. And it's okay to smile when you speak, unless it's a tragedy. And by smile, I just mean a slight smile, just because it slows your voice. So I think, yeah, I always knew when people were nervous, when people are nervous, and some of them acknowledge it. They'll say, I've not presented to the board before, I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm so appreciative of your time tonight, the opportunity to share with you how nutrition is connected to student learning. And I'll leave it at that and move to the next slide. I'm going to leave some room here for Lisa. So this is one of the best tips I'm going to give you when you need to present. You probably all know this just through your own life experience, but you're going to rehearse. And these are the 3 things you absolutely want to be ready to just say in your sleep. Your opening. If you know how to open, you're going to be fine. What are your key points? I don't need all the detail necessarily. I mean, I might hear a lot of detail, but what are your key points? Do you need the board to know that they're going to be approving X at the next board meeting? And this is their opportunity to hear the background behind the recommendation and for you to collect their questions, etc. But what are your key points? And also your closing. Those are the most important things you're going to rehearse. And by rehearse, I mean literally say it out loud. I have family members who say, Mom, are you on a Zoom? Are you on a call? And I'm not. I'm just talking to myself because I'm rehearsing to present something to a board of education. So yes, I hear voices. I just said that in a recorded document. Next slide. Read the room, not your slides, and help bring the whole audience along, if you will. So let me share with you a situation I observed. It was a board room. It was packed, absolutely packed with people who were there to protest the consolidation of 2 campuses, which was being studied in the district. And that is why they were in the room. Prior to that presentation, though, prior to the item that they were there for, there was a presentation on AP classes and some AP tutoring services that were in place, a partnership with a local university and so forth. And no one in the room necessarily knew what AP was. No one ever said what AP was. They just kept saying AP. Can you imagine? That room was packed to a point of overflow into another room. What a great opportunity to say AP accelerated placement classes, which, as the board knows, you don't have to insult the board. You can say, as you know, means X, Y, and Z, X, Y, and Z. We're proud to be the district in this region that offers the widest range of these programs to our students. I'm proud to stand before you tonight and share with you that we have increased the participation in these programs by X, Y, and Z. Part of that is from your policy that said, and then we went into AP testing. Maybe that makes sense to this group, maybe it doesn't. I'm not going to belabor it, but my point is adding 2 minutes of some overview of the magnificence of this program in this district would have informed a room full of people who were not here, not attending to hear about that, but nonetheless could have thought, wow, that's pretty amazing. I had no idea they do that. That's terrific. But we lost that opportunity. And so to those who present on budget, know that if the room is packed for something else, don't lose the opportunity to inform that group of the realities of your budget. And even look at how you tee up your agenda. Maybe you want, if you know the room's going to be packed for water polo, because water polo is always a room packer, as is cheerleading, then put the budget before that. So don't lose that opportunity to inform that group of people of what's going on in that particular area. So never lose an opportunity to educate and advocate, I say. And I just read my slide. Next slide. Of course, you want to welcome questions. If you don't have the answer, I always appreciated hearing, that's a terrific question. I don't, I don't have all the information at hand that I'd need to answer it specifically, but let me get back to you. If you say that, do it. Boards notice when we hear staff say, let me get back to you, and we don't. Like, and you're gonna have to do it through your superintendent for sure. But you really, like, if there are 4 questions, you want to answer those questions. And if they were asked in public, understand what the district's process is for providing that information publicly as well. I think that's a new wrinkle to our world, since more people are attending online, thus more people are engaged. So I attend a meeting and Ann Wells speaks on X, Y, and Z, and the board has 3 questions, and they're really from the community, because the board is there on behalf of the community, right? I think good, healthy organizations right now are considering how do we answer those questions, not just for the Board of Education, but where does that belong more publicly as a follow-up? That's something you might want to take note on. And I'm drawing to an end here. Next slide. Yeah, I always loved it when the team, whoever was presenting, acknowledged their team. You know, just a moment of gratitude for the number of people who are working to make the plumbing project move through seamlessly, or transportation. I just really appreciated when it wasn't just the person standing before me, but just literally behind me are 35 people in nutrition services who work tirelessly to feed our kids. And I just want to say I'm proud to represent them here, and I thank you so much for your time tonight. I think that's an important point that communicates to your Board of Education and thus to the public, the team, that sometimes less visible team. Everyone's familiar with their teachers, right, for the most part, and that front office staff, but behind them in the district office and in so many places are people who need their work to be publicly praised and connected to student learning. And if we don't do that, they don't do that, right? But more people like my sister-in-law who like come to work and say, today, you know, the French fries I serve a middle school kid might be the best part of their day. And I need to know that. I need to own that, whether I'm in counseling or, I don't mean that I need counseling. I meant the counseling office. Okay, ladies? Okay, again, uproarious laughter. Hey, I see Andrea Bennett. Neat. I feel like Miss Marianne in Romper Room, who never, ever, ever said goodbye to Terilyn, because I stood there forever waiting for her to say, she said goodbye to Karen and Andrea and Megan and Lisa, and she never said goodbye to me. Next slide. This is an infographic that I created with Twin Rivers. It shows their budget. It's hard to read here in the slide, but it illustrates the point of how we took a very, very complicated message and just distilled it down to, and you see that, you know, that classic school services dollar, but we just distilled it down to some basic visuals. Let me tell you that the CBO and I went back and forth on language, back and forth, back and forth. They're inserting all this J90 budget language, like base revenue limit, whatever. Okay, do you know what my mom thinks base revenue limit is? She has no idea. Also, my mom thinks an LCAP is a water conservation plan. So if you can't make it simple for the board, you've not helped the board make it simple and clear to the public, and that's their job. So it's okay to land on common language. It's advisable. This I can make available to you as a follow-up to this presentation if you want. I think you've seen many, many examples of it. And I will also say Lisa's work in this area has been remarkable. So she's going to give you some really great tips. Next slide. So here's what I want to offer you, because I think we have to stick together. Education needs help from every possible direction. So I'm giving you my information there. Whether our firm works with you or not, if you find yourself putting a presentation together and you just want to shoot the breeze, you want to pick my brain, you want me to look at something and assist you with it, please reach out to me. I am happy to be a friend and a colleague to any and all of you. So I hope that you have the privilege of standing before your Board of Education and know that you are standing before your public, the entire public. They are elected to represent the community. Whatever you share with them, and if you share it in a way that makes sense to them and is digestible and simple, or at least has been simplified, distilled into key messages, they're going to take that out to the public. They're going to say, I do know that teachers are upset about being moved around on the campus. It's very unsettling. But we want to make room for our littlest learners, and this is the only way we can do it. And so here are the supports that staff's putting in place for those teachers. And just know that we're so grateful for them ultimately accommodating this. Won't come easily, but it will happen. And when those babies are on campus, though, everyone will be glad. If you say that to me, I'm going to say that out there, right? So you're kind of giving them their message points. You are very much giving them their message points. And you all represent folks, whether it's in IT or business, in various areas that don't necessarily speak like this, but you want to encourage them to work on it. You stand before the board, you're standing before the public, and you're telling the board what to say to the public. So it's been a pleasure to be with you through a fire drill. I think we survived, as only women can. Nimble, nimble, nimble. And I'm going to turn it over now to my friend and colleague, Lisa Gonzalez.
Thanks, Terilyn. I know that there are questions that are going to keep coming in, so please, everybody, do send those. You know, I just want to echo some of the points that Terilyn mentioned. When she was talking about prepping you and your readiness for a presentation, I think it's also really incumbent upon all of us to make sure that if we're bringing in other presenters, if we're bringing in our auditor, if we're bringing in somebody to be introducing some type of a project, we have to take the time ahead of time to prep them. So I know that for a recent board meeting, I did the same exact thing where I sat down with the consultants and I said, look, based on what we've seen at recent board meetings, you have to find a way to get this presentation done in 8 to 9 minutes. What are the 5 questions you think the board might ask? And let me give them that information ahead of time, because there are some boards where it'll be really conversational and they may ask a bunch of questions and it's all well and good. And there are some boards where if you start making presentations and there are too many questions, it may sidetrack your item. And so being able to get an idea as to how the board responds and how the superintendent likes that to run is really, really important ahead of time. I think the timing of questions is equally important. There is an advantage to having any public questions be asked before the presentation, because then you don't necessarily have to answer them at the end of a presentation and have somebody put you on the spot. So I think that there is, some playground room that you can have with that one to sort of figure out what may make the most sense. One of the things that we do in our district is we publish our board agendas on Friday afternoon, Friday evening for a Wednesday board meeting the following week. By Monday morning, the board members are supposed to submit questions. It gives us as staff an opportunity to respond to those questions. Typically, we could have anywhere from 2 to 12 pages of questions. And then what I do as a chief business officer is I delegate those to my team and have them respond. And what we're finding is hardly anything gets pulled from consent, not because the board is rubber stamping, but because they've had all their questions answered ahead of time. There are often times where over the last year, I thought, gosh, I wish they'd asked this. Now I put that question in. If I think that there is something that they should be asking, I'll put the question in and then I'll put the answer in. And that way I'm giving them more than I may have put in a presentation, because we do like to keep those presentations concise. I go really old school when I have to do a board presentation. I will print out every single slide. I will convert it over to PowerPoint, because then I can print it out in the notes format. And so I don't have an example here, but what it looks like is basically, here's your slide on the top half of the paper and the bottom half is blank. And that's where I put all of my talking points, because sometimes I need to be reminded, oh my gosh, this is a really great point. It's not in the slide. I want to bring it up. And that way I just go through the paper copy. And that way, if anything happens with technology, I don't have to rely on it going down. So yes, we invest a little more in paper in my department, but it's one of those things that it makes me a better presenter. Sometimes I don't ever look at my notes, but it's a nice crutch in case something happens at a meeting, I get distracted, somebody says something that may throw me off, and it sort of puts those blinders on and really helps me. Terilyn said something about you don't have to have an answer to a question, and I really need to reiterate the importance of that. If you don't have the answer at hand, some of you may be able to relate to this. You present a 150-page budget and they have a question on page 122 on line 7. And you may not know exactly what went into that number. It is so okay to say, let me get back to you. You can expect to hear from me by the end of tomorrow. I will send it to all of the board and the superintendent. Immediate credibility, because the last thing you want to do is say something that's incorrect, because guess what? These meetings are recorded and someone is going to go back and say, on ABC date, you said this. A great tip that someone gave me, certainly with budgets, and I'm just looking at a budget right here and you can just see sort of all the numbers that are here. We'll go really precise on a budget, but sometimes when I'm doing presentations, I'm going to round some numbers. The reason I do that is because if your $1,473,000 changes to, 423 goes to 427, it gives somebody an opportunity to come back and say, you just changed that number. But there's an advantage to having some rounder numbers that help sometimes, because we all know every single month when we go into our budgets, the numbers have changed. They're going to be exactly right and precisely wrong. And many of you know exactly who I got that comment from. Again, don't try to answer a question that you don't know the answer to. Super important. One of the things that I've really been trying to do on my team is empower my team members to present with me. Now, I know that sometimes they get really super nervous. So what I'll do is I'll say, look, we've got a 15-page presentation. What page are you comfortable with? And then they can write some notes and they can present on just a page that they know they can be successful in. We recently did textbook adoption, and we had some of the teachers come up and they would take slides here and there, and being able to shift some of those presenters and set people up for success is really important. If you can do a dry run with another group, like I had our transportation coordinator, he'd never presented at a board meeting before. And I said, well, I need you to come present at budget advisory. He did it there. He knocked it out of the park. It was so good. I said, you got to go to the board meeting. He then did even better at the board meeting. And now people love to hear him present. So think about how you set people up for success and how it's not just you as the talking head. The last thing the board wants is me talking at a board meeting. But when I can share that with other people, things go over much better. Not because they don't like me, but you can only hear from the CBO so many times. The other thing, there's something that I want to share real quickly, because Terilyn was talking about not having a lot of slides that may go into a lot of depth. And let me just share a dynamic, and I'm going to share part of this presentation with you right here. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at this in SlideShare. There it is. This is a page from one of our budgets. There's a lot of information on here, but there's a reason I keep this on here. The reason I present like this is because I'm taking a page straight out of our budget. I don't ever want to be accused of manipulating any numbers. But what I do is I say, I just want you to look at this one thing. And then I'll tell them, and then I'll show this. So in one of our budgets, we were talking about future employee compensation. Here is the money we have set aside for this. I still keep everything exactly the same, but I'm telling them exactly what I want them to look at. Terilyn was talking about how you identify and you say exactly, here's where we are. Here is a budget cycle. This is a public school district budget cycle. Here's where we are right now. This is where we've been. This is what's coming up next. I use this same exact slide over and over. I may change some of the numbers to 2023, but in essence, you can expect to see this slide and my red arrow. These are multi-year projections. For those of you that work in the business office, you know how complicated these are. I have narrowed these slides down to 5 things I want the board and the public to look at in our budget. And any presentation that I've done for the last year and a half, I always say there are 5 things I want you to do when you look at a budget. 5 things, that's it. And I talk about the numbers and I tell them exactly where to look and I show them the arrows. This way, again, I'm continuing to use exactly what the public sees. I haven't added or subtracted, but it breaks it down so that laymen can understand 5 things. Revenue trends. My arrow is not working. Expenditure trends. Over, under. The increase or the decrease to the unrestricted general fund. And the ending fund balance. By the end of one of my presentations, 5 things, the same exact slide with my arrows, I can get through it. And the board has gotten really used to being able to see me do that. So
Lisa, can I jump in there just to echo something you said?
please.
I love 5 things that I need to see in this document that is a public facing document that is consistent. And I like really common language under words that we use and we're comfortable with, but I want it to resonate with everyone, including those parents who are now have a kindergartner in school for the first time. It's all new to them. Revenue projections. To be clear, the money that comes into the district from the state, that's where just kind of maybe explain it. Spending trends, we get that, right? But anyway, and here, just common language. And I see Karen Kimmel on here, and she and I worked together for years and years with Don Zimring, who taught me, who was so great at this. And I remember he said, here's my concrete example, deferred maintenance. Let me just tell you what that means. It means we're holding on to some money because something might go wrong at a school site, no different than how you run a household. Your refrigerator might break. You might need some roof repair. We wouldn't be responsible to our schools and the people who work in our schools if we didn't hold on to some funds in order to take care of that unexpected need. Okay, now I know what deferred maintenance is, but do you know how many people out in the real world use deferred maintenance as language? Zippity doo dah. So give me that explanation, and I want to say I want to just say how pleased I am to see those presentations, Lisa, and how you draw my attention right to that number, and also explain there's a lot more on this slide than the 5 points I'm making, but I want you to know why. I want everyone to see the same page that's actually in our, now you've explained that to me as well, because I'm sitting there slightly distracted, Lisa, by why do you have all this stuff on here? It's like sheet music. I'm over. I mean, the John Gray presentations, you guys look at those, you can read that slide that's so densely packed in a minute, the way my musician husband reads music. I'm overwhelmed by it, but Lisa just said, this is what everyone sees, want you to see it, this is what I want you to pay attention to, and please put common language on it. It's so helpful to us because people don't talk for like, I don't know, multi-year projection. Sorry. I know you do.
Another one that gets really difficult for people to understand is the difference between restricted and unrestricted. And so in our district, we've talked a lot about restricted funds, and we use an example that everybody can understand. And this is not exactly what I want it to be, but imagine this is a Starbucks card. A Starbucks card is like restricted funds. There are only certain things you can buy at Starbucks. You can't go out and put fuel in your buses in the district with restricted funds. Restricted funds can only be used for certain things. And finally, the last thing that I'd like to do before I think we've got a few minutes here for questions. What I have found is that Joe Public and many of us don't understand budgets and some of the fiscal issues. It's really difficult to understand in public education. It is not like the business world at all. And trying to explain it in layman terms is sometimes very challenging. And when we try to explain it, we get really wordy and then, we go down and we lose everybody. So I got this idea from someone else. It's always somebody else's idea. It's never mine, but I want to share one thing. I started creating these videos called Ask the CBO. And there are some of these where, I've got hundreds and hundreds of views. Yeah, the recession one, nobody wanted to know that. I thought that was a really good topic. But, you know, comparing benefits or on versus off schedule increases. And what I try to do is do some really look at a 5-minute video. I try to do these really short videos to explain a specific concept. And that way I'm able to get a snapshot in time. It may be something that people in the community are talking about, or it may be something that's coming up in negotiations. Just do a super quick video, share it out with the community, and I'm done with it. And that way I can also refer people back to that to really explain what's going on. So it's taking that idea of a board presentation a step further to be able to really educate your community, because the more we educate them, the more they understand the work that we do. So questions for people. I don't know if any have come up. Terilyn, have you seen any that are here that we can help answer? I know there's been a
I haven't, but I'm going to share 2 more things that I watched as a school board member that just meant so much to me. You know, because we get pelted by why do you have any reserve at the end of the year? You should have spent it all on teachers. Or I recall a CBO sharing that. Let me just share with you this bit that's left over. Again, running a household, right? You know what your income is. You know, you project your expenses at the end of the year. If you haven't overspent, you're in good shape. There's some left over. Our reserve, if we were living on a $90,000 a year salary, would be, and then you put it in dollar amount. So that helped me really understand. That was again Don, he would turn, actually at the time Karen Kimmel was working with Don, and he turned to her and compliment her on how well she managed the budget, and he put that in household terms. That really helped me at the supermarket when I was explaining any leftover funding. One last tip that I'm going to share with you, because I think the November board meetings are going to get really turbulent as we look at consolidating campuses as needed, moving teachers around for spacing accommodations, you know, negotiations. Certainly are looking, you know, from my vantage point being here in the law firm and they negotiate all over the state, it's getting a little turbulent out there. So I just want to say, always meet the emotion. You can go up to 40,000 feet to meet everyone's emotion in that room. And it goes something like this. People are here tonight because they care. And we're glad you care. We're glad you're interested in education and you're here on behalf of your children or whatever your particular interest is. We know there are different points of view on whatever it is you're studying tonight, the budget. But we are glad you're here. And so tonight I'm going to walk you through the facts of the situation, and then you just so you at least acknowledge that you try to at least connect with the crowd. It usually kind of calms things. It certainly doesn't take away animosity and criticism and all that's going to unfold in that meeting, but at least lets you meet that emotion. And I think that is your job as leaders in the organization, to try and be as cordial to the public. They're entitled to their opinion. If they think you should be paying teachers more, that's their opinion. They get to share it with you. If they think you're paying teachers too much, they get to share that with you too. If they think the superintendent makes too much, I would just say, like, move to the side and dodge that bullet if you can. I would just say people are entitled to their opinion. This is democracy and it's supposed to come into that meeting. So I would just make sure that you are as cordial to those points of view as possible. And I don't know if there are any questions in there that we should be taking, Lisa. I'm happy to follow up with infographics that I've created with districts that tell different stories. One of them was from Mount Diablo, and I'll send those to Lisa and Tasha, and you can share them with your group if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions either. So I just want to remind you that Terilyn said she'd go ahead and take a look at your presentations. If anybody wants to share anything with me, you are welcome to do that. You can find me here in Mount Diablo Unified. I also have a super easy email that I use for everything personal, lisatheprincipal@gmail.com. I know, super catchy, but you know what? You're going to remember that one. We love the fact that CASBO has really branched out and said women in leadership and the needs of women within our organizations are important. We've created many of these sessions. We're getting ready for another roundtable here in a few weeks. We hope that you will continue to join us and tell other people, and certainly give us the feedback that if there are other important topics like the one that you heard today, that you let us know, and we will make sure that we find the best presenters we possibly can to be able to bring those to you. Before I let Tasha close, I do want to say thank you so much to Terilyn Finders. I'm so excited to be able to call her a longtime colleague and friend, and she's one of the smartest, most articulate people. And I've got notes, really seriously. I have notes all over my desk of things that I'm going to steal from exactly what she just said, including that Twin Rivers budget at a glance. I'm going to make sure that I do one of those, because there's never any need to reinvent the wheel. You just copy what somebody else has done. So Terilyn, thank you from all of us for making all of us better presenters, and adding more to our professional toolboxes. And with that said, Tasha, tag you're it.
Well, I just want to put a huge exclamation mark on everything that we've learned today. And as you said, we've all learned from each other. We're going to continue to do that. We know that the topic of negotiations is important to us as we look at salary negotiations for our own work. That's going to be one of our next on the lineup to share with you how to negotiate. And so we'll just continue supporting each other. Thank you for being here. Thanks for your patience through some technical challenges, as we had a big fire drill here in the past in the building. And we, again, thank you. Have a great day. We're here to support. Bye, everyone.